The jungle was drowning them. The year was 1906. The Philippines, a narrow jungle trail on the island of Samar. American soldiers, sweating through their khaki uniforms, moved in tight formation. They were armed with the U.S. Army's standard sidearm, the Colt Model 1892 revolver chambered in .38 long Colt. They felt ready. They were not. From the dense vegetation, a Moro warrior broke through the wall of green. Charging, blade in hand, his body wrapped in strips of bark to slow the bleeding, his mind altered by locally prepared drugs that deadened the sensation of pain. The American soldier fired, once, twice, 3 times, 4. The Moro kept coming. This was not a story told in whispers around a fire. This was documented fact, written in army reports, field dispatches, and medical records that would change the history of American firearms forever. Because from that terrifying moment in the Philippine jungle emerged a question that would define American military doctrine for the next century. What does it take to stop a determined enemy? The answer was not the graceful, slim Walther PPK, that elegant little German pistol that would one day make James Bond famous. The answer was something far heavier, far louder, far more American. The answer was the Colt M1911. And if you want to understand why that decision was made, and why it was never reversed, you need to understand 2 completely different philosophies of what a military pistol is supposed to do. So stay with me, because this story goes deeper than most people realize. If you want more deep dives into the weapons, tactics, and decisions that shaped the greatest conflict in human history, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel is dedicated to the men and the machines of the Second World War, and we are just getting started. It begins, as so many American military decisions do, not in Germany or France or the Pacific, but in the Philippines. After the Spanish-American War ended in 1898, the United States found itself in possession of a colonial empire it was not entirely prepared for. The Philippines came under American control, but many Filipinos, particularly the Muslim Moro people of the southern islands, had no intention of trading one colonial master for another. They fought. And they fought with a ferocity that shocked American soldiers. The Moro Juramentado, warriors who had taken a sacred oath to die fighting, were among the most terrifying opponents American forces had ever encountered. They would bind their limbs with cord and vegetation to restrict blood flow. They used local drugs to suppress pain, and they charged into American lines carrying crises and barongs, bladed weapons capable of inflicting catastrophic wounds at close range. The U.S. Army's standard sidearm at the time, the Colt M1892 in .38 long Colt, was found to be dangerously inadequate. Medical officer Colonel Louis-LaGarde documented the case of one prisoner, Antonio Caspi, who survived multiple shots from .38 Colt revolvers during an attempted escape in 1905 on the island of Samar. Men were being killed even after firing all 6 rounds from their revolvers into a charging attacker. The situation became so desperate that the Army reached back into its own history, pulling old Colt single-action Army revolvers chambered in, .45 Colt out of storage. Weapons from the Indian Wars, weapons from another era. And those old .45s worked. The heavier bullet, with its greater mass and energy transfer, stopped the Moro warriors far more reliably than the .38 long Colt ever could. That fact, that brutal, blood-soaked fact, became the foundation of American firearms philosophy for the next century. In 1904, the Army commissioned the Thompson-LaGarde Tests. Colonel John T. Thompson, who would later give his name to the famous submachine gun, and Major Louis LaGarde conducted extensive tests on cadavers and live cattle at the Chicago stockyards to determine the minimum effective caliber for a military sidearm. Their conclusion was unambiguous. The new pistol should be no smaller than .45 caliber. That requirement would eliminate virtually every European-designed sidearm from consideration, including anything Walther would ever design. Now let us travel to Germany, to the workshop of Karl Walther GmbH, to understand the other side of this story. Fritz Walther, son of the company's founder, was a brilliant engineer with a particular gift for compact, elegant design. In 1929, Walther introduced the PP, the Polizeipistole, or police pistol. It was a masterpiece of engineering for its time, featuring the world's first commercially successful double-action, single-action trigger mechanism in a semi-automatic pistol. The shooter could carry it safely with a round in the chamber and the hammer down, then fire immediately with a single pull of the trigger, a revolutionary safety concept that would influence firearms design for the next 100 years. In 1931, Walther released a shorter, more concealable version. The PPK, the Polizeipistole Kriminal, the detective's pistol. Designed for plainclothes police work and undercover operations, the PPK was everything the PP was, but smaller, more concealable, more elegant. It was chambered primarily in .32 ACP, a cartridge producing roughly 130 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. Compare that to the .45 ACP that the M1911 was built around, approximately 355 foot-pounds. The difference is not subtle. The .32 ACP delivers less than 40% of the .45 ACP's energy at the muzzle. In Germany, this was entirely acceptable. German military philosophy viewed the pistol differently. For German officers, the sidearm was primarily a badge of rank and a tool for close-quarter situations, executions, prisoner control, personal protection. It was not expected to stop a charging enemy at 30 yards. The Wehrmacht's standard sidearm, the Walther P38, was chambered in 9mm parabellum, far more powerful than the .32 ACP, but still well below the .45 ACP in terminal performance. The PPK was for intelligence officers, Luftwaffe pilots, SS men, and plainclothes Gestapo agents. It was elegant. It was concealable. And for its intended purpose, quiet, close work, it was extremely effective. Adolf Hitler himself carried a personalized Walther PPK, serial number 803157, in his final days in the Führer bunker. On April 30th, 1945, that same pistol became the instrument of his suicide. A .32 ACP round through the temple was more than sufficient for that particular task, but by then, American soldiers were carrying something far more formidable. Let us go back to 1907. The U.S. Army opened formal competitive trials for a new service pistol. The requirements were clear. The pistol must be semi-automatic, must chamber a cartridge of at least .45 caliber, and must demonstrate extraordinary reliability under field conditions. 6 manufacturers submitted designs. Within 2 years, only 2 remained. The Colt, designed by John Moses Browning, arguably the greatest firearms designer in history, and the Savage Model 1907. Both were chambered in the new .45 ACP cartridge Browning had developed specifically for the trials. The final test, conducted in late 1910, became legendary. Each pistol was required to fire 6,000 rounds over 2 days, an almost incomprehensible endurance test for any mechanical device. When the Colt's barrel grew too hot to handle, the solution was simple. Dunk it in a bucket of water. The Colt experienced 0 malfunctions, 0. The Savage pistol suffered 37 failures. On March 29, 1911, the U.S. Army formally adopted the Colt Browning design as the Model 1911. It was chambered in .45 ACP. It weighed 2.44 pounds unloaded. It launched a 230-grain bullet at 830 feet per second. And it was built on a doctrine of stopping power that had been written in blood in the Philippine jungle. John Moses Browning had given America its pistol, and America was not going to let it go. Now we must understand what the M1911 endured over the next 7 decades, because that record is the truest explanation for why nothing, including the elegant Walther PPK, could ever replace it. The M1911 went to war in 1917, carried by American doughboys into the trenches of France. Sergeant Alvin York used one at the Battle of the Argonne Forest in October 1918, drawing his pistol after his rifle ran dry and shooting 6 German soldiers who were charging his position, causing the surrender of 132 German soldiers. It was one of the most extraordinary one-man actions of the entire war, and the M1911 was at the center of it. Between the wars, the Army refined the design slightly. The mainspring housing was arched, the grip safety was lengthened, the trigger was shortened, and the hammer spur was abbreviated. The result, standardized in 1926, was the M1911A1, the iconic form that most Americans recognize today. Internal dimensions and parts remained interchangeable with the original M1911. Then came December 7th, 1941. The attack on Pearl Harbor triggered the largest military mobilization in American history. 16 million men and women would ultimately serve. And every branch of the armed forces needed sidearms, millions of them, fast. The industrial infrastructure required to produce large quantities of a reliable, proven design was not a luxury. It was a military necessity. Between 1942 and 1945, approximately 1.9 million M1911A1 pistols were produced by multiple manufacturers, including Colt, Remington Rand, Ithaca Gun Company, Union Switch and Signal, and Singer Manufacturing. Yes, that's Singer, the sewing machine company. American industrial capacity was being turned toward the war effort at a scale the world had never seen. The Walther PPK, whatever its technical merits, could never have been produced in these numbers. Its manufacturing processes were more complex. Its caliber was doctrinally unacceptable by American standards. And it was, in the end, a foreign design, a German design. At a moment when the United States was fighting Germany with every resource it possessed. There is something else the PPK could never offer. The deep institutional confidence that comes from decades of proven performance. American soldiers trusted the M1911. Officers trusted it. Generals trusted it. Medal of Honor recipients had used it to save their lives and the lives of their men. That trust is not quantifiable, but it is real. And in the military, it matters enormously. Consider what the M1911 was doing, while the PPK was becoming famous as a spy's pistol and a tool of German military officers. On June 6, 1944, thousands of M1911A1 pistols hit the beaches of Normandy. They were carried through the hedgerows of France, across the Rhine, into the heart of Germany itself. They were carried through the jungles of the Pacific, at Guadalcanal, at Peleliu, at Iwo Jima. They were used in the frozen mountains of Korea and the rice paddies of Vietnam. Over and over, in every climate and every terrain, the M1911A1 proved itself. Heavy, yes, large, certainly. But when an American soldier needed to stop a threat at close range, when everything else was gone and it came down to that single sidearm, the 45 ACP delivered. The PPK simply could not make that promise. By the end of World War II, the PPK had become primarily famous in the West for two things. As the weapon Adolf Hitler used to end his life, and as the chosen sidearm of a fictional British spy. James Bond's famous Walther PPK, introduced in Ian Fleming's novel Dr. No in 1958, gave the little German pistol a cultural cachet it had never enjoyed before. The image of a sophisticated secret agent drawing a slim, elegant pistol from a shoulder holster was irresistible to popular culture. But there is a deep irony in that association that most people miss. James Bond was British. British intelligence agents operated in a world of concealment, of shadows, of European intrigue. They needed a pistol that could be hidden under a tailored suit that would not print against a dress shirt at a casino in Monaco. The PPK was perfect for that world. American soldiers operated in an entirely different world. They needed a pistol that could stop a charging enemy combatant. They needed a pistol they could fire with a hand covered in mud. They needed a pistol that would still function after being dropped in the sand, submerged in a river, frozen in snow. They needed a pistol with enough raw power that even a marginal hit might end a fight. The M1911A1 was designed for that world. The PPK was not. In 1985, after 74 years of continuous service, the United States military officially replaced the M1911A1 with the Beretta M9, chambered in 9mm NATO. This decision was driven primarily by a desire for ammunition interoperability with NATO allies, most of whom had long adopted 9mm as a standard caliber. Logistics matter in coalition warfare. A common cartridge means that Allied forces can share ammunition in the field, a significant tactical advantage. The adoption of the M9 was controversial. Many soldiers and officers who had carried the M1911A1, their entire careers were deeply unhappy with the transition. The 9mm cartridge, while significantly improved from its World War II-era loading, was seen by many as a step backward in stopping power. The debate over the relative effectiveness of .45 ACP versus 9mm continues in firearms circles to this day, with fierce advocates on both sides. Notably, even after the M9 became the official standard, the M1911 did not entirely disappear from American military service. Special operations units, who have greater latitude in equipment selection, continued to carry M1911 pattern pistols. The Marine Corps purchased over 4,000 updated M1911 pistols, designated the M45A1, as recently as 2012, issuing them to recon Marines. The last M45A1s were only fully retired from U.S. Marine Corps service when the Sig Sauer M18 became universal, a replacement process completed years after the M9 transition. The M1911 served the United States military for over a century. No pistol in American history, or arguably world history, has served a single nation's armed forces for as long, in as many conflicts, with as consistent a record of effectiveness. The Walther PPK, for all its elegance and technological innovation, was never seriously considered for American service. Not because it was a bad weapon, it was, in fact, an excellent weapon for its intended purpose. But because its intended purpose was fundamentally different from what the United States military required. The PPK was designed for concealment, for plainclothes police work, for the world of intelligence and counterintelligence. It was a tool built for close, quiet situations where the priority was discretion over power. In that role, it excelled. For 70 years, European police agencies trusted it. Intelligence services around the world selected it. Even today, the PPK remains in production and in service with various agencies across the globe. But when the question was asked, what do we arm 16 million soldiers with, soldiers who may need to stop a fanatical enemy in a jungle or on a beach or in a snow-covered forest? The PPK had no credible answer. The M1911 did. Here is what the story of the M1911 and the Walther PPK really tells us. It is not simply a story about two pistols. It is a story about two nations with fundamentally different military philosophies, and about the way those philosophies are shaped by the specific experiences of combat. The American military came of age fighting enemies who did not stop when they were shot. From the Moro juramentado in the Philippine jungles to the human wave attacks of the Korean War, American soldiers repeatedly confronted opponents whose determination and physical endurance made stopping power not just desirable, but absolutely essential. That experience created a military doctrine, rooted in the Thompson-LaGarde Tests of 1904, that demanded a minimum caliber of 5 and was deeply skeptical of anything smaller. The Germans, and the Europeans more broadly, developed a different doctrine. For them, the pistol was a secondary weapon, a badge of rank, a tool of last resort. The rifle or submachine gun was the primary weapon of the German soldier. The pistol was secondary, and for secondary weapons, concealability and ease of carry were more important than raw stopping power. Neither philosophy was wrong. They were simply adapted to different battlefield realities and different military traditions. But there is a lesson in the M1911's longevity that goes beyond technical specifications and historical circumstance. The M1901 endured because it earned the trust of the men who carried it, not through marketing or tradition alone, but through performance. It worked. Under conditions of extraordinary stress and hardship, it worked. That record of reliability, built over 7 decades of continuous service in the most demanding conditions imaginable, created an institutional confidence that no new design could easily displace. When the US military finally did replace the M1911, not with a German pistol, but with an Italian one, the transition was painful precisely because that trust ran so deep. Soldiers who had trained on the M1911, carried it through 2 years of combat, and relied on it with their lives were being asked to accept something new. Many of them never fully did. That is the real legacy of the M1911. Not its engineering brilliance, though that was genuine. Not its stopping power, though that was real. Its legacy is the bond between a weapon and the men who carried it, a bond forged in the fire of the Philippine jungle, tempered in the trenches of France, and proven on every battlefield where America has ever sent its sons and daughters. The Walther PPK is an icon. It deserves its place in the history of firearms. But it was never going to replace the M1911 in American service. The two pistols inhabit different worlds, and the world that the M1911 was built for is the world that American soldiers have always occupied. The brutal, unforgiving world of close combat, where stopping power is not a preference but a necessity, and where the difference between a .32 ACP and a M45 ACP can be the difference between going home and not going home at all. The Colt M1911 endured. It endured wars. It endured decades. It endured the constant pressure to modernize, to standardize, to replace. And long after the last M1911 was officially retired from American military service, it remained. In the hands of special operations troops, in the holsters of law enforcement officers, in the collections of veterans who remembered what it felt like to carry it, a symbol of something that cannot be easily replaced. The belief that when everything else fails, raw American power will carry the day. If this video gave you something to think about, if you found value in going deeper into the history behind the weapons that shaped the greatest conflict in human history, please take a moment right now to subscribe to this channel. Hit the like button and activate the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Every video we produce is built on the same commitment to accuracy, depth, and respect for the men who fought. Thank you for being here. We will see you in the next one.